Let's take a sip here.
What's your drink of choice tonight?
Water.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah.
He's dying.
You know, all the killings that happen in this movie happen around water, so...
Mm-hmm.
Oh god, he's gearing up.
And welcome to the UGO podcast, Netflix and Kill edition. And man, it's been a while, but we got our man Justin. Our man Justin is back.
Say hi, Justin.
Hi. Hey, long time no talk. Hey, how you guys doing?
You know what? You do make me think of, like, mysterious callers in the middle of the night. They never do just call and go like, "I heard you had a rough day. Was it that Stacy bitch again? I told you." Like, there's got to be some, like, actual nice, like, heavy breathing caller. And, like, there's got to be at least one that we never hear about.
Well,
I don't know why. You doing that voice makes me think like Malbosia is prank calling me from the Spawn movie, just like, "Hello there."
ugh.
I wish for practical effect, your day was not that bad.
I think I should prefer the Zodiac Killer.
Yeah. We don't actually see his face, so good.
Yeah.
No one ever saw his face.
Well, there's that one kid, but we'll get to that. But yes, who's talking about faces and voices over the phone? Why, it's me, Nick, the Merc with a mic, and my fellow Unapologist,
Travis,
and our guest Unapologist,
Justin, the guy with the last name who's also Z. So maybe I'm the Zodiac Killer.
right? So, and Justin, what film are we talking about today? Even though I'm pretty sure we've blown that lead.
Oh, okay. For those of you who literally just started listening, I guess, into the 2-minute mark, why would you? We are talking about 2006's film Zodiac.
The Zodiac Killer has come to San Francisco.
Another letter.
School children make nice targets.
He gave himself a name.
Greek, Morse code, astrological signs. This guy's used them all.
I like killing people because man is the most dangerous animal of all.
How does one do that?
I like puzzles. I do them a lot.
Got any hard suspects?
About 90 an hour. I'm up to around 500.
You got 4 crime scenes, not a single usable print. You can't think of this case in normal police terms.
He's breaking the pattern.
Glenda said you were a cartoonist.
Oh, yeah.
What are you doing at a gun range?
I just want to help.
What are you, some kind of Boy Scout?
Eagle Scout, actually. First class. Well, I've been thinking...
Oh, God save us all.
There's no evidence, Robert.
What do you mean there's no evidence? You have him seen with the ciphers, the military blueprints, the bloody
All
knife.
circumstantial.
Why do you need to do this?
Because nobody else will.
Dave, you made a mistake! Get away from the window.
Paul, are you okay?
No.
Why'd you do it? You put your face out there for him to see.
Hello? Who is this?
Zodiac was my job. It's not yours.
He's still out there, Dave.
Killing is his compulsion. It drives him. It's in his blood.
Jeez.
What?
Squirrels.
This is the Zodiac speaking.
I have a gun.
I can give you a lift to the service station.
Do you always go around helping people in the night?
I'm not the Zodiac. And if I was, I certainly wouldn't tell you.
Are you sure there's nobody else in the house?
Now, I just gotta ask right away. I know this wasn't your first choice, but is this punishment for Spawn?
No, this is a reward. What are you talking about? This is a treat. Because, that's the thing. Well, okay.
You give bit of honeys away as treats, don't you?
I'm just saying, for people who are listening, I did have another film picked, and I was really excited about it. And, of course, because Netflix hates us, they took it off, like, a week or so ago. So, yeah, as the time of the recording, it's not there. But, thankfully, I did a quick search on my playlist that I had made up, and I'm like, I have, like, maybe 3 movies that I haven't seen that I would really like to talk about this week. And this was the top of the list, so...
Yeah, and in our defense, we took too long to get to your first pick.
I know.
And the reason we took too long is we were busy watching this movie, and this movie takes forever to watch. So
you will savor every last minute of it. Darn it!
So we're gonna get into it right now because this is a David Fincher film, and they're known for being more thinking man's, like plotting kind of more
artsy pieces.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I got to tell you that and this was based off of true events. You're correct. This is it's pretty much. I mean, the Zodiac killer was a real dude. How close was this to actual events? From what I looked up, it was pretty.
This is based on the book that the lead character wrote, Robert Graysmith.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I think they used one other book for like secondary material, but basically, from all I can tell, based on their investigation and the stuff they came up with, it's largely fairly accurate. Like every event that happened in here, more or less happened the way it did. I mean, some of it has been like reworked for dramatic effect, and in fact, I watched a couple of the things, like that one televised talk with the Zodiac killer. It's altered a bit based on just how much detail they show from the full video, because the stuff on YouTube is only like one section of the conversation. So I'm sure there's a few things that are heightened for dramatic effect, but otherwise it's pretty factual. So
yeah, and therein lies like a mark in the good column for the film, and also a mark in the negative. Is that
no,
it
doesn't.
Cannot
because I sense where this review is going, so it's gonna be fun.
And it's going in a real contentious direction already, but we're gonna get into it. But we'll talk about the part I liked, which is actually the first hour of this film, because the first hour of this film is basically like a Fincher film. I'm like, oh man, these characters are colorful, the dialogue is pretty fun. I'm actually really interested in the Zodiac killer because they do a good job of like portraying like how like they really set you in the time with how frustrated they were trying to figure out who this guy was, because he calls in, he takes credit for kills that might not have been his. It's like it's hard to tell how many people he's actually killed, if it's a ploy for him to get caught. Is the guy calling in even the Zodiac killer, or is he some sort of glory hog? He doesn't seem to have a set pattern of killing people. He goes dark for extended periods of time. It puts you in the shoes of the police chasing him. One of the police being Bruce Banner himself.
You got Mark the Hulk Ruffalo after you got a problem.
Yeah, Mark Ruffalo, and then I loved it because it was Robert Downey Jr. in a bigger role too. I'm like, oh man, this is before he was even Iron Man. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I think this is like the first big film right before he did Iron Man. I think there's this and like one other comedy, and then Iron Man came out and made him a superstar again. So.
Yeah, he's really, really good in this.
Oh yeah, like just his whole arc that he goes through from the beginning of the film to, I mean, he kind of disappears 2/3 into the movie, but there's just so much that happens to him, and you can't blame him for the way it ends up. So.
Well, see, that's one of the things that when you stick so close to the true story, some of the characters pop in and out of the true story because they don't have as much to do. So narratively, like we don't see Robert Downey Jr. for quite a bit, and it's like, oh well, okay, like he was one of the more fun parts about this movie, but like I guess we'll follow Jake Gyllenhaal for a while. The cops themselves kind of fall in and out because they just lose interest in the investigation. Or not so as much interest as in like it's just been way too long. We're never gonna fucking catch this guy if it's been years.
They've lost leads, but like actual physical evidence has decayed. It just kind of like it stacks against them really quick.
Well, and not only that, but there's like so many other crimes happening that they just can't devote all their time and energy to just one single case. Even though it's the highest profile case they had, they're like, yeah, we've had like 200 other murders in the time we've investigated this crime. So
yeah, and it's like Robert Downey Jr. said at one point was that like, hey, more people died on their ride, like on their transit to work on the I-05 or something in the last like 2 weeks than this guy ever killed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it kind of puts in perspective of like, yeah, like Jake Gyllenhaal might find that this case is important, but like it is not like. like, I'm sure for the victims and their families and too, it's also important, but like in the grand scheme of things,
yeah, except for like after almost that amount of time this movie passed on, I think if I was that family, I'd be like, just let it go and stop bringing it up to me. I'd rather move on.
Yeah, I'd rather move on. Like, other people have come to accept that, like, that is the thing that happened and I'll never get an answer for it.
But the problem is that Jake Gyllenhaal's character, the actual author of the book this movie is based off of, while that's convoluted, has no reason for doing this, and he states that in the movie.
Well, his reason is that he likes puzzles.
Yeah,
like, he's just driven. He invests himself so much into this case that it just starts to consume him. Like, you know, it feels very much like other movies and other characters I've seen, where just that, like, even
that
characters that Jake Gyllenhaal played.
Yeah, like,
exactly.
I mean, this is his character from Prisoners or and Nightcrawler, except those characters had more of like well, Nightcrawler is just basically evil, but Prisoners, he had more of a driving force behind him of, like, you know, being a cop, trying to, like, do good. Like, it's like when everyone asks him in this film, like, what's your deal? Like, why is this important to you? He never has a fucking straight answer for it.
I don't think there is a straight answer. I think he's a citizen journalist in the sense that he's just so... It's like those people on, like, Reddit or Facebook who become, like, you know, investigators during the Boston Marathon bombings. Like, they just feel driven to do it just because they want to do it, kind of thing.
Yeah, but those people can also cause more harm than good.
And that's kind of the problem, is that, you know, his investigation, the more that he goes on the case, it is kind of a nuisance for a while, because he's just so consumed by this. He can't think of anything, to the point where he's driving away his family, to the point just like, hey kids, can you help me solve this murder? It's just...
Yeah. And, like, I think that's my problem with his characters, that I lose interest in the story because I'm not driven by his reasoning for doing this. Right. Like, I don't feel compelled to finish out his story. One, because I'm like, okay, this is based off a true story. I know they never caught the guy, so whatever resolution is going to come from his character's resolution. And I start to care less and less about what ends up happening to this character, because he doesn't really have a very strong motivation or reasoning to keep going.
And if it was any other movie, we really would be following Mark Ruffalo or Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, but that's the problem, is that he's the author, so he's the lead character.
Right. Yeah, and that's
the problem.
Like, that seriously is, like Robert Downey Jr. is a way more fun character to hang out with. Mark Ruffalo is a way more driven character. Like, Jake Gyllenhaal's character is basically just hanging out in the background when this thing starts, and he kind of just suddenly starts to take over the investigation for, like, little to no reason. And it's, again, this is like, I also want to mention that I really like the way this film is shot, because all Fincher films are shot very well and very professionally. And
he's a master craftsman. Craftsman.
Yes,
that's the word.
Like, every shot is, like, very interestingly set up, and it's like I'm really enjoy this from a visual aspect. What really kills my enjoyment of this movie is that, well, one, it's 2.5 hours long.
Yeah, and that was something we realized about an hour and a half in, because I had to go to work when we started watching this movie. I'm like, well, we got time to watch this, there's no problem. And after a while, we're like, alright, this story's been going on for a while, how much longer? Oh my god, why? I think is my exact words.
Yeah, once, because me and Travis were like, are you bored yet? I'm like, yeah, I'm bored. How much longer is this?
It didn't even do that. We just, like, curiously, I'm pausing the movie, and we looked at that, and we're just like, why?
Yeah, there's a whole hour left, and I'm like, oh, shit.
And I think that this was the director's cut, because the official director's cut is 2 hours and 42 minutes, and I think that's the version that's on Netflix. So they added, like, 6 minutes of footage just for this version.
6 minutes isn't going to help one way or the other.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying it's extra long. I mean, and that's what I'm saying. It would have been any shorter if we watched the theatrical cut.
So, and then the thing is that it actually it's hard. Like, it hard cuts transitions throughout time as well. Like, it hard cuts, like, oh, this is 9 months later. This is, like, a year later. This is 6 years later.
4
this
years.
is 4 years later, and then, like, 7 years fucking later. And it's like it's it's like at once rocketing through the story because it takes place over such a long period of time, and also plottingly like taking forever to get anywhere.
Well, that's how most cases are handled, because you don't solve a case in 28 minutes. Like,
Right.
Yeah,
But
except it works better for a documentary then, where I'm like, oh, if I'm watching Making a Murderer, that's way more interesting than watching a full-fledged narrative. And
see, I don't fully agree, because I feel like we do have those documentaries. We do have those documentaries on the Zodiac Killer several times, even before this movie came out.
Yeah, and they're way more interesting than this movie. Like, they are way more interesting because they read like an actual technical, like just delivering you the facts. And this is probably going to come from just a different philosophy of film. But my rule is that, like, okay, well, all film rules are like, nebulous and can be bent and broken, but like the top tier one, number one, is be entertaining. It's a form of entertainment. Like, you cannot be boring. And it's just like after the hour mark of this film, I'm like, I'm not getting more out of this than I would out of a documentary. And the documentary's goal is different. It's to be informative over being entertaining. And I don't know, that's why, like, when you do a biopic, like, say, Argo. If we were to take Argo has many points in the film where it does not follow the true story. It adds more tension than there actually was during the mission. And they whitewash the lead character. And they whitewash the lead character so that Ben Affleck can play him as well. But the end result is that film is way more narratively engaging and feels much more like a movie because they changed events around. And that's just part and parcel for when you adapt a real life story into a film, because you're always fighting with how much do I stay true to the source material versus how much do I I got to change some stuff in here just so it follows a narrative structure, because this film doesn't even have like a 3-act structure. It has I think it does. Like, it's not an overtly like structured film, but if you think about what happens in each chunk of the film, there is a structure to the story.
Yeah, except for its ending cuts to black and gives you facts.
Because that's what had happened.
Right, but then it's
literally
not
the point when they got to the ending is the last bit of this investigation, because as the text shows, the dude who was the main suspect died like shortly after this whole thing happened.
Right, but that's not a good resolution. Then you're just stating facts.
And it's just like the case.
And that's what I get is that, yeah, it's okay for the case to not have a good resolution. That's what's real life. So the documentary of this film, I don't care if it doesn't have a good resolution. This is a fucking movie. This is a story that doesn't have a good ending.
No, it just doesn't have an ending.
But there's lots of movies that don't have endings. I mean,
and they all suck. And they all, and I hate them.
No Country for
Old Men is a great movie up until that non-ending. Like, it is, man, that is a fantastic film until they decide to not show the ending.
And you guys are wrong, but okay.
I didn't watch that movie. I just know Nick hates all movies that don't have an ending.
No, it's a thing for me is just that, like, I understand that it's an artistic choice to not have it. No, okay, we're not going to talk about my bias for non-endings in movies, because this film is basically, that's not this film's problem.
Yeah, I don't usually agree with Nick on the whole non-ending things, but this one I have to, because, like, watching a documentary would have taken half the time. It would have been just as enjoyable. Like, the first half of this movie is entertaining, and then it keeps going for another hour.
Well, and it tries to make the best of both worlds out of a documentary and a biopic, and it does not get either. Like, it does not get either.
I don't think this movie was meant to be entertaining. Like, there's really very little of it that's actually, like,
and I hate that excuse, too. This film is not meant to be entertaining. It's not meant to be interesting. It's not meant to be enjoyable.
But I come from the school of thought that entertaining is relative, one, to the type of viewer, but two, to the type of entertainment you get from films. Because, when I watch, my other film I would have chosen, There Will Be Blood is not entertaining. It's interesting. It's fascinating, but it's not an action film. It's not, a thriller.
Oh, I completely agree. But the way that the entertainment and the interest comes from characters and their journey, the dialogue between characters, motivations, and just how great the level of acting is in that film. And while this film has some of that in the beginning, it does not have. It never feels like it is leading anywhere.
See, but I don't agree. I feel like that's really the whole drive of the film. The fact is that there is that momentum because Jake Gyllenhaal's character, whether you actually get a clear understanding of his motive, we understand that he is driven. Because, you can say the same thing
but
about
he's not driven for any good reason. But
neither is character from Nightcrawler. His only motivation is don't be poor. That's not a specific motivation. That's just a general thing. And
that's because we're watching the origin story of a villain. Which, don't be wrong, Nightcrawler has its problems too. But he is much more of a this guy is narcissistic. It's like we get much more smaller scenes of why he's doing the things that he's doing and why he's such an evil guy.
Yeah, but I feel like that's still communicated. You don't have to spell out everything for this character to give it to you. To understand that he is driven. Jake Gyllenhaal, I feel, communicates that through his acting and through the dialogue that's written.
I get that he's driven, but why? Is it
because it's this freaking Zodiac killer? The Zodiac killer is a crazy situation with this guy sending these creepy letters, sending ciphers to translate his letters. Making phone calls and attacking people and that stuff. Wouldn't you be fascinated by that? It's a really crazy, bizarre experience.
For a couple months.
Wikipedia article.
And that's the thing. That's the reason why nothing got progressed is because everyone gave up after a few months, and he was the only guy left who was actually making progress on the case.
And he never ended up fighting the guy.
Yeah. But he's still, pretty much everything seems to point to that one guy. The only reason why, because the case is still open, technically. They actually reopened it shortly after this film came out.
Well, and then, but they cleared him with DNA evidence later, and then they were
but he's still the number one suspect. Even though the case was closed for a bit, and then it got reopened, and it's still open to this day, he is still the number one suspect, even for this day.
But then he died. And it was and as far as we know, the Zodiac killer had never killed after that point. And it's just
which they explain in the film too, as a possible theory.
Yeah, and it's and there's so many theories as to what it could be. And I'm once you get to the end point of this film where it's they cleared a bunch of people with the partial thumbprint and the handwriting. The handwriting was a big deal. Yeah. And our lead guy or our main suspect is ambidextrous. So they were wondering if that was a marker in it. They were wondering if a personality change could actually change your handwriting.
And all that is factually interesting.
Yeah, no, don't be wrong. Okay. But then after a while, it starts to muddle the evidence for me. I'm just wait, so who's cleared and who couldn't? At the end point of this film, it made me think so anyone could have been the Zodiac killer.
They even actually show that in the movie, where at one point, Jake Gyllenhaal's character goes to talk to a woman in jail who was friends of one of the murder victims, and she's trying to tell him a name of a person. He's like, "It's this person, say that name." She's like, "It's not that name, dude. Stop reaching."
Yeah.
But then she gives him the name of the dude. She gives a very distinct and specific answer to that one.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's no, but the evidence leads there, and it's still I'm okay, so this was probably the guy. That's as far as, the film seems to want to push it. Just, this was probably the dude, but even then, we don't have the evidence to put him away. And then he has, a heart attack when he gets called in for questioning, I think, right?
Yeah, no, which again, among many, many things in this film, that seems to, be suspicious, because that's the whole point they made, where they connected all the dots to these random events to things that happened to this guy. And then the very last capper, which seems to almost affirm his guilt, is the fact that that somehow he died literally right when they're about to question him.
Even then it's
you can't prove it.
That's that's a capper to his guilt in the same way that he's got stressed because they got called in for questionings for a murder and then had a heart attack. I get that, okay, there's a lot of questionable things about this guy. And I'm if you were to put me in a fucking jury room, I'd be yeah, he probably did do it, but if you're going to get me to beyond a reasonable doubt, I probably would never get there, because there's all it takes is one coincidence in this chain of evidence for me to go that doesn't make a lot of sense if that was him, because
and that's ultimately why he never got caught, because even though that guy who at the end they show he points to the dude's face, he could have said yes, that dude was the guy for sure. But that's the only problem was he literally died right before that moment could have happened. So that's why it's one of the more fascinating unsolved mysteries, because there's just literally no possible way to solve it 100%.
Yeah, and and I get how that would be frustrating for anyone,
even the audience,
and especially the audience. Well, and then it's not like I'm not like I was actually seriously like really enjoying like the first hour. I'm like, you know what? This is pretty good. I really like.
They do a bit weird where they actually focus a lot on the Zodiac killer himself and his killings.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, that's kind of interesting.
And they are very disturbing.
Yes.
Like they focus on that. They focus on Robert Downey Jr.'s character. They focus on Mark Ruffalo. But then somewhere near the hour and a half mark, it switches to Jake Gyllenhaal's story very heavily, and I will have to really like the only thing the film communicates is that he is driven, not why he's driven or why this thing is more important than the safety of his family, which you're going to have to sell me on some sort of reason why this is important. Because ultimately,
I feel it's the same thing as Close Encounters of the Third Kind, at least in that case. If you ever saw that film,
I've seen the ending of that film where he does go off into the or was it the director's cut where he goes off into with the aliens?
Yeah, no, that's the ending, and that's what I'm saying. Throughout that film, most of it, that guy is just driven because he's driven. He has a lot of circumstantial reasons to be driven, but he's just doing it because he wants to do it. And that's just the thing. It's about that willpower to do something, even when everything else says you shouldn't. Everything else says that it's dumb and you're neglecting other people, and yet they still driven. Because even Ruffalo's character, like, out of his own sense of duty, because they tell him the case is done, don't investigate anymore. When Jake Gyllenhaal presents him more evidence, he clearly just still wants to investigate it because he wants to catch that guy.
Yeah, and I guess I disagree in that that's a good character trait, because I also think that Close Encounters of the Third Kind guy is also an asshole.
No, because he is. I agree. I'm not disagreeing on that one.
And it's like I don't find. I'm like, oh, isn't it fascinating how this guy let this case destroy his life? And I'm like, yeah, but he could have so easily not have. And excuse me, I'm gonna take a glass of water. Travis, what was your main takeaway from Jake Gyllenhaal there?
Well, my main takeaway is just the fact that I guess I stopped caring about his character all entirely because I know how it ends. Like, that's the worst part of those movies, that, oh, I know this guy survives because he writes this fucking book this movie's based off of, so, whoops, no tension there. And the fact that we know there's no resolution to the story, so it just, as a narrative, it kind of falls flat once it stops being interesting for me, because I'm like, okay, I can just go on Wikipedia and get the same information, so...
And then when he finds the guy he suspects might be the Zodiac killer later, I forget what, like the guy that ended up having the movie,
the guy with the movie theater.
Yeah, the movie theater. And it's like, oh, this is creepy. And I'm like, yeah, except I'm pretty sure this is not the guy, because if it was, like, how does Jake Gyllenhaal write this fucking book?
Right, and the whole entire thing seems to be a red herring, and I just really dislike those scenes.
But that's something that happened, and that's the thing, they're trying to communicate the feeling of that. Like, even if you know what the ending is, you still should, like, it's trying to put you in his shoes as if you had never heard this mystery before. So I think it's an inherent problem with telling real life stories, that you always know the ending. Gandhi always dies, because that's the ending of the movie Gandhi. Lincoln always gets assassinated because that's how Lincoln's life ended. It's just an inherent problem of if you can go along for the ride, even knowing where the destination is.
And the thing is, I can go along for the ride for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
2.5 hours is too long to not get an ending for. I'm sorry. Like, that is...
I think that's where my main problem is that there's just too much of this movie where I'm like, I only have a certain amount of investment. I can't go with you, but so far. And I believe, like, I don't know if we're gonna have a spoiler section for this one, since it's a fucking, like, life, like, well, one, it doesn't have...
Spoiler,
like,
he doesn't get caught.
He doesn't get caught. Like, there's not, and again, there's not really there's not a traditional ending to this film. It's just like, it's like, oh, well, this is how many years later, and here's the kicker is that the kid shows up at the end, played by, the nerdy guy from Westworld. I forget his name.
Oh, that guy? Oh, that's right. That is that guy.
Yeah. And he shows up, like, turns out he was the kid from the beginning of the film that got shot but survived, and he's gonna try and identify,
who the Zodiac killer is.
Yeah. And he's like, it's been so long, but I'm pretty sure it's that guy, the main suspect, which is like, oh, okay. But then again, they cast doubt on that too, because he says, like, this guy has a rounder face. Like, wait, did you point to the second guy? Like, no, he had a rounder face like this guy, but this is the guy. And I'm like, And I'm just like, in a courtroom, I could have torn that apart.
Yeah.
Like if I'm a defense lawyer, I could have totally fucked with that, along with a lot of other evidence there.
Despite that, the amount of time passed, and like everything else.
Well, not only that, but it's also a metaphor for how much time has passed in the movie. Because one, I had to remember who this kid was, and then I'm like, this scene. Like, there's nothing wrong with it, technically. Like, it is just, like, everything is shot the way it should be shot, it's acted the way it should be acted, but I'm like, why does this scene not have as much emotional impact when it's like, that's the guy, cut to black, and I'm like, why is this not working for me? And the only reason I come up with is just, it's been too long since I've seen this kid.
Yeah.
I do not remember this kid, I barely remember how he died. Like, I had to, like, oh yeah, he got shot, like, in the beginning, with that weird, which was also a weird scene with the girl. I thought the girl was the killer for a minute. Like, the girl was so weird.
Did you watch that scene?
No, the girl, he comes up to like, oh, why don't we go someplace where there's only where we can be alone, you know? And I'm like, okay, she's either really into him and really wants to go fuck him in the parking lot, or she wants to get him in an isolated environment to kill him. And it's like, he's like, Jeff, you are wearing way too many clothes. It's like, Stacy, whoa. No means no, girl. Damn. I don't know. I just like, I thought her character was funny.
Yeah.
But the end scene is kind of like, it's been way too long, especially for a general audience to kind of care about who this guy is, and the fact, like, also it raises the question is like, oh, so they never before this point did they have him try and identify this guy from a picture?
I think that was one of the things that got caught up in between the different districts of policemen, like, trying to investigate it. Because so many murders happened in so many different kind of across county lines.
Yeah. So like,
and they can not testify. Like, that's the thing. They have the choice to not point that stuff out if they don't want to. Because they tried it with one of the other guys, the guy who got stabbed in the lake. He lived, but that was the point they said is like, yeah, he bolted as soon as he had a chance to get out because he didn't want to be involved with it anymore. So that hindered the investigation because this guy could have ID'd either voice or some body about the guy.
Yeah, and what was it? That was another thing I liked in the beginning of just the calls to each precinct, trying to figure out like, man, where is this what is the chain of evidence? And like, have you sent me this thing? Like, we don't have telefax yet. Also the period piece work in this film is pretty good too.
It is.
Like, it's all it's very well set up. It's like, I don't know, for me, this is easily like the weakest Fincher film I've ever seen. And
wait, weaker than Panic Room?
Oh,
weaker than Alien 3?
Panic Room was his?
Yeah.
Okay, I did not know Panic Room was him. And I would watch Alien 3 over this. Stuff happens in Alien 3. I hate Alien 3, don't get me wrong. I think Alien 3 sucks. Like, it's not good. But it invokes an emotion of me, like, later, like, and it's like, it actually gets a response, and this is just like...
talk about boring films.
Yeah. That film has an alien in it. like it's like, at least
and
has
it's
that.
Still boring.
I'd have to watch Panic Room again, but I'm like, yeah, Panic Room was also pretty dull. But yeah, as far as some of his best film, like this, you know what? I like his good version of Zodiac, which is the girl with the dragon tattoo. That's basically the actual like movie version of the story.
But that's also based on fiction, so I feel it's a little bit harder to judge an actual, realistic portrayal of something versus fictional depictions of an event.
Yeah, which is why I believe that if you're going to do a true story, don't be afraid to change things to fit it to a narrative, or two, just don't do the true story and have things inspired by a true story.
That's what Dirty Harry was.
Also Heavy Rain, which is a terrible game.
Oh yeah, that's right. But
man, I used to agree with you all. We're starting to just diverge right now.
Do you like Heavy Rain?
Yeah,
I will walk out. Oh my god, I'm out. Nope, I'm out early.
I don't think it's flawless. I don't think it's great. I think it's a fine game.
That game is terrible. That game is functionally terrible, narratively terrible. Just, it's awful.
Okay. That is another podcast for another
That game touched me in a bad place.
It really did. It vibrated me. It just vibrated.
It touched you like the prime suspect of this movie.
Yes.
Well, I think where the difference comes from it here is that I feel like there are people who appreciate this film that are film auteurs that really appreciate the technique of film, which, don't get me wrong, I do. Mm-hmm. But I think first and foremost, like, what are we doing here if we're not here for telling me a story? A film is a story, and you're telling me a story, and a story has a beginning, middle, and end, and each of them are in a structured way, and the idea of a story is that is leading somewhere, and this film is leading to the realization that the guy never got caught, that this guy eventually he must just give up and just write the book and go like, okay, well, I was satisfied that this is probably the guy, and then that's good enough for me. And it's not really a strong, like, character resolution, because we don't even see him reconcile with his family. We get that text at the end of just like, oh yeah, he lives happily with his family, and I'm like, oh, okay, so that worked out for him. That's cool.
I feel like that last scene with his wife kind of said everything you needed to say, though. Like, she wasn't going to yell at him, she wasn't going to divorce him per se, she just said, do what you need to do, and then stop. And I think that communicated enough, because he did it, clearly, so...
Right. Well, I thought like that meant like, oh, well, he'll never get a good answer, so it'll never be good enough for him. But
that's kind of what happened. So.
But it did happen, but we never see it. So it's like, oh, okay. Like, out of all the scenes we do see in this film, we never see like him finally. I just wanted a scene of him finally coming to accept the fact that he was never going to get a straight resolution out of it. Like,
but I feel like that last scene with him seeing the guy at the hardware store kind of says that, you know, even though
does it say that, or does it just say that?
But I feel like that's what I'm saying. It's communicated visually and non-verbally. I feel like that says everything you need to say. Any other words would have been superfluous in that case.
I could read into that scene that I'm taking this too far, and I'm personally seeing this guy, and I'm never going to let this go.
That's kind of what I felt too, honestly.
Yeah, you can read whatever you want into those scenes, which is like which I get might be the intent there. But I just needed a scene with him returning to his family and being like, okay, I'm done with this.
Yeah, and I just feel like that wasn't the point of the film. But that's just differences, I feel. So yeah.
Yeah, and to be fair, I don't get the point of the film. I really don't. I don't feel like whatever point of the film is lost in the minutia and the nitty gritty details that of the case. And I get that. You want to capture a realistic of how the investigation felt at the time, but if how the investigation like actually feels is boring, then maybe it's not a great idea to capture the real life feeling of it. And I feel like this about a lot of different true stories and stuff like that. Like I had that problem with what was the Tom Hardy one? Damn it. The Prohibition where he runs fucking alcohol. And
that movie wasn't all that great to begin with.
No, and that movie isn't
Lawless, right?
Yeah, Lawless. And that movie also had other problems that weren't just based off the story, but it has one of those endings like, really? That's what happened to that guy? But again, you can't really change it because that's what happened to the guy in real life. And I don't know, like this is always my problem when they adapt anything from a true story, and I'm like, for the most part, I would say leave true stories to documentaries. I feel like they have a much better ratio. Like I wouldn't want to watch a narrative movie about the Making a Murderer guy, but I want to watch like the trial and like all the different weird elements to it because that's engaging and like interesting factually, but I don't want to watch a narrative about that guy because he's creepy and kind of a dick.
Well, okay, here's something too then. Thinking that. So did you see The People vs. O.J. Simpson?
I did not. I heard it was pretty good though.
Well, here's the thing. So there's that version, and then there's the documentary version, the O.J. Made in America, that people also loved. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I can see the difference in saying, yes, the documentary may tell you more actual truth. Like, it'll tell you a straightforward story. And they did not exactly make up, but they re-altered a few instances in the narrative of People vs. O.J. to make it thematically engaging or dramatically engaging kind of thing. But I feel like both have their merits. I feel like there's still merit to having the fictional and the documentary approach to it. Because the fictional one, we got great performances and dialogue through, that reenactment. I don't know. I guess it's just which do you prefer?
No, but and I agree that I don't mind alterings to the narrative to make it more engaging to fit a narrative. Like that's totally cool with me.
That one ends too, where it's like, yeah, we arrested him for something else, but we never proved if OJ did it or not. So.
Sure, but like I think that's my main problem is that this film does not do that enough. It does not alter events quite enough to engage. But yeah, I believe that especially biopics are always better to like, if I want to get a sense of who this person was or try and capture a feeling of a person, that's always better to watch a biopic, rather than a cold outside look from a documentary. But like, I don't know, for a case like this where there's, I guess Jake Gyllenhaal is supposed to be our main character, but I know so little about him. Like, what is, like, his personality?
He's a cartoonist.
All that I know about him is that he is driven, and that is not compelling enough to watch for 2.5 hours. Like, that is cool for an 1.5-hour thriller, but I need more to be engaged with you, like, for longer than that. I don't know. I guess we'll go into our overall ratings and stuff, because we don't really, like, I would say, like, hey, let's do a spoiler section, but
we spoiled it already.
We already spoiled it, and plus it's like there's not a whole lot to spoil. Like the
investigation was reopened in 2007. If you cared, you'd know about it.
Mm-hmm. But you know what? I think that if it proves anything to me is that Robert Downey Jr. definitely deserved that second chance, because he seriously kicks ass in the first part of this film.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no.
Sorry, go ahead, Justin.
Oh, I was saying, yeah, this and Scanner Darkly were kind of the 1-2 punch to show, oh yeah, Robert Downey Jr. can act. Remember that, people.
Yeah, and I think one of my favorite scenes is the one where they go get a drink together, and he gets this, like, Jake Gyllenhaal gets this blue monstrosity thing, and it's like, what the fuck is that? Like, it tastes good, like, here, try it. And, like, so it hard cuts to, like, 6 of them empty. And I'm like, yeah, that was pretty fun. Like, this is a fun drunk scene. And man, can Robert Downey Jr. act drunk.
If he was acting.
Yeah, he's he can really channel that messed up kind of charming atmosphere there. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and I'm sure he didn't have to deviate too hard in that final scene of his too, where he's sitting in the houseboat just living in the shambles. It's like, I'm sure he has a little bit of personal experience there too.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, probably drawn on some dark places there. I think Mark Ruffalo also did a pretty good job, even though he gets basically sidelined halfway through it to like, well, I guess I'm not the main character anymore, so see ya. And I don't know, like it's not like I hated this film. I just don't feel like anything off of it. Like it's not really invoking anything for me. And to be honest, I would say, like, well, if you want to see like a thriller and stuff, but David Fincher has so many better thrillers, like Girl from the Dragon Tattoo. Like, you're not gonna get anything from this. Like, I especially, like, when I was watching certain scenes, I'm like, oh, he repurposed this scene later for Girl from a Dragon Tattoo because this was like one of the more intense scenes or something like that. You can definitely see him learning stuff in this film, but I don't know, like I think the person who gets the most out of it is David Fincher himself. So I can't really recommend it. So I'm going to go into my final rating of let's see, 2 super blue kind of gay drinks out of 5.
Kind of gay drinks? Okay.
Yeah, well, that drink was pretty gay. Like, it was like if I were to go into a gay club and be like, yeah, those would be the types of drinks I would see, is like that with the little umbrellas. And
they'd probably kick you out for drinking that kind of drink. Like, no, not here, dude.
Not here. Travis, what about you?
I have no idea how to rate this movie, to be honest. Because I pretty much did enjoy the first 1.5 hours of this movie. My biggest problem of it is going to be the fact that it is 2.5 hours long. That's way too long to hold my interest. I do kind of agree with Nick that the main character isn't interesting enough to follow for this long. Our side characters, who are far more interesting, not that Jake Gyllenhaal's a bad actor, are falling in and out of the story. I have no idea. I'm just going to give it a 5, straight down the middle.
5 out of 10?
5 out of 10, because I have no other idea how to rate this movie, because I don't hate it, but I never plan on watching it again.
Okay. And Justin, how about you?
Well.
Here we go.
All right. Well, I know that we had to listen to Nick and Travis really slog about how much they were bored with this movie. And, I will give you this. My 2 complaints I did have with this movie is that it is very long. Because I also did have that check when I realized, there's another hour left in this movie. And it didn't really stop me from watching it, because I had to watch it anyways. But I do agree that there is a few points when the narrative lulls a bit. So you're not completely wrong with that. And it is also a personal taste thing in that matter, because, most people don't have the patience to sit through 2.5 hours of movie. And then my only other gripe I actually had with this movie was that I felt some of the soundtrack choices were a little bit out of place every now and then, where it seemed like a really dramatic thing happened, and then we cut to a really peppy song, just because it's the 70s. We need to really evoke the era. So there were a few maybe creative choices there musically that should have been reconsidered to keep the tone. But that's the thing too that I feel with this film is that it is a procedural. Much like a lot of law procedurals, it is about the story and the facts and the case. The characters, they're interesting enough, but I feel like this is a movie about the story. It's a movie about this case and how it happened. And, because people, we say there's a lot of documentaries, but a lot of people don't watch documentaries, or at least not the way that most people think they do. We watch, Making a Murderer, and it's thrilling because it's made to be this engaging, peppy stuff, but an actual documentary that tells you all the facts probably would be a little bit dull. So I kind of like the fact that we get this dramatization of trying to communicate these details in a way that would educate you and still give you a little bit of tension. And I felt like for me, I enjoyed it almost all the way through. I thought that all the actors were great, even actors in smaller roles. The guy who was the main, what's the role? The guy who he would always fact check with the handwriting, the older guy.
Yeah.
History
professor.
I want to say his name's Paul Mooney, or not Paul Mooney, it's someone other actor. But he's another one of those veteran actors that pops up in everything, and he's great in this. I thought that I really liked a lot of these side characters. With David Fincher, he's really good at picking, unknown or lesser known actors and just making them blend into the story. And I feel like he did a great job of the ensemble here. I thought it was edited great. I thought that there's never a bad cut or a awkward cut between any transition. The period details are great. I think it's a beautiful film to look at all the way through. The cinematographer is Harry Savides, I think, or Harris Savides. He's one of those mainstay cinematographers of the time too, and he just shoots this film like crazy. It's just so good looking. And for me, I just felt like even if it was the point when it was very long and very fact heavy, I still was interested enough in the facts, because there is a lot of the stuff I didn't know. I didn't know some of the details about the suspects and the trail and even some of the victims, what happened to them afterwards. The whole thing with picking up the woman from her car after he sabotaged her back wheel and then gave her a ride, just going by the way, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to throw your baby out the car. That whole scene, I was just I was just totally freaked out by that. But yeah, I really, really dug this. And I also, again, come to that school of thought as a guy who's a big film critic and analyst, is that I don't feel like entertainment only means it has to have those really gripping, tense moments. Sometimes the quiet moments and the watching things happen logically can still be entertaining if you find yourself invested in the mystery. Because, we don't always need to have popcorn films. Popcorn films are fun. Action films are fun. Even stuff like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, that's fun. But at the same time, we have to also remember there's the reality of the situation. And sometimes the reality can still be engaging. And again, this is different strokes for different folks, because I know a lot of people who I will not recommend this to, because they will not sit through 2.5 hours of this movie. But for me, I enjoyed it enough that I'm actually going to give it 8.5 out of 10 squirrels in a trailer park.
Those squirrels are weird.
And half the squirrel is in the freezer.
Before we get out of here, I will push back a little bit on the fact that I did not think this film, my problem with this film is that not enough cars blew up in it, or not enough things happened. My problem is that for me, the mystery was not engaging, and our main character was also not engaged. It's not like the fact that not enough people got shot in this film for me. It was I feel like it fails on what it tries to do. I realize that films are trying to accomplish different things and there are different goals and stuff. This is not a Fast and the Furious film. But
there's somewhat of intelligence to it.
Yeah. And but yeah, I wish it would have I wish it would not have been so slavish to its source material, I guess.
Fair enough.
But you know what? We'll leave it at that. We'll get on out of here because I've been getting some weird calls lately, and I need to check that down. Run that phone company there.
Nick, I heard you didn't like my movie.
David Fincher, is that you again?
Stop calling us.
Stop calling here.
Check out The Social Network.
Yeah, make that Steve Jobs film finally. Go on. Get out of here. Get out of here, Fincher. Get out of here. All right, and then we're going to get out of here, too. So, thanks, you guys, for listening. If you would like to listen to any of our back catalog on Netflix and Kill, you can do so at any of our web pages that host our content, including our website, unapologeticgeekout.com. You can listen to us on our Facebook page, iTunes, we're also there, Stitcher, all that good jazz. If you want to rate us on iTunes, please give us a 5-star review, and we'll read whatever goes in that review box on the air word for word. I'll read you, just like the Zodiac Killer, I'll read it in my creepy phone caller voice. That'll be
Actually,
pretty cool.
Please send it as a cipher, because I would love to wake up and just like Nick trying. I gotta figure out this fucking phrase.
And it says, "Eat my balls."
It's just like, no, like, oh wait. But yeah, if you also want to, email us or contact us and tell us your thoughts on Zodiac or who was right and who was wrong, or maybe you want to type in like, man, it's just a shame they really should have covered There Will Be Blood. You can go to unapologeticgeekout@gmail.com. Maybe give us a message on our Facebook page. You can follow us at Twitter at UGO Podcast. Maybe follow our Instagram at UGO Podcast as well. Check out some of our latest con pictures from like GeekCon or KitsudaCon or any other conventions we do. Justin, where can the people find you?
Well, since this will likely be the last time I'm on Netflix and Kill, because I can't seem to recommend movies everyone likes.
Yeah, you can recommend whatever you want. You just have to put up with us when we don't like it. That's the difference.
I know. You had to put up with me with a bunch of other films, so. But usually you can find me here on the UGO Podcast doing either news or Netflix and Kill, whatever they want me to do. You can also find me at oneofus.net. I write the stories for the Breakfast Pub, and I was on an episode a few weeks back, which is pretty cool. And otherwise, you can find articles there, and then I'm just on Facebook and Twitter. So, Travis, where can they find you?
They can find me the exact same place. Nowhere. No one ever find me.
Travis doesn't like people talking to him very much. I like to, get a diversity of opinions and get some feedback for the show. And Travis is just like, that would mean I would have to change anything about myself, and I'm not really down for that.
No.
I'm not crazy. Why would I change perfection? Like, what's the deal?
You just can't, Nick.
I mean, this is what you get, Nick. This is what you get.
You knew what you were getting when you started this.
I did. I also like Justin's, I'll do whatever they want me to do. It makes it sound like we are holding him hostage, which is pretty good.
I am stuck in Nick's basement.
I do whatever they want, otherwise I get the hose again.
Put the review in the freaking basket.
Or you'll get the Cowboys versus Dinosaurs again.
No!
Running jokes. Anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. We are Unapologetic Geek Out, and we're out.